The project System Synthetics aims to open up new perspective and thoughts and try to inspire and involve the public into a discussion about the potential benefits and the further consequences which could derive from a partnership with fungal organisms and particularly from a man-made evolution of life. The focus of my project lies in the establishment of a form of collaboration with fungi, as these organisms are found to be capable of performing cycles of decomposition and transformation of both organic and inorganic compounds and substrates. I got interested in two specific organisms. On a side, on a fungus and on its potential. The fungus is called Phanerochaetic Chrysosporium, and it's been found capable by some researchers from the University of Wisconsin in 2007 of being capable of degrading plastic materials, even the toughest plastics, including phenolic resins. I was fascinated by one main industrial cell factory, which is a yeast. It's the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is known also as a baker's yeast. And its capacity to produce alcohol is being exploited nowadays for the production of bioethanol as an energy source. So the goal of the project has been, and still is somehow, the one to improve the performance of these two organisms by combining their capacities. And so on the side, the property to degrade plastic and waste with the ability of producing alcohol and therefore bioethanol. And this to be achieved by designing a new life form, by creating an intimate endosymbiotic relationship between the two organisms. Trying basically to define the best conditions under which the two organisms could coexist. And I conducted different kind of experiments by growing the two selected organisms on different media, both solid and liquid, and using different inocular densities and comparing biomass production of the mixed and the single culture. And in this way I started, you could say, defining the way, like the ideal conditions in which the two organisms could start peaceful coexistence. And more than that, I've been expressing fluorescent proteins in the partners, so to enable easy visualization in the co-culture. And I became aware of the fact that the aim of creating a man-made endosymbiosis is a rather ambitious idea and would be a major breakthrough in scientific work. Particularly, it's very ambitious to think about doing that in such a short time. And the work consists of three main parts: an installation, a model, and a film. The plastic gets grinded in order to facilitate the action of the fungus on the material. After the grinding process, the plastic gets transferred in the main column, the central column, which is the reactor itself, where also the symbiotic culture is transferred and where the process of degradation would take place, together with the process of conversion of the material and the resulting biomass in bioethanol, so the production of alcohol. Then it goes to the last step, which is the step of distillation, where the compound is purified, resulting in bioethanol. So I decided to create a model of this visionary organism, which I was not able to create in the lab. It's more like an ambitious future organism, where you can see the yeast cells, which are the black parts implanted within the fungal hyphae.
I have a couple of points I'd like to point out, which I think are interesting for discussion. And I think at this point still, we have a lot of scientists who hobby in art. And as we've seen just now in the presentation from Maurizio, we have artists which hobby in science. And maybe they are not full-fledged artists or full-fledged scientists in both capacities, but I think they still touch each other. So I actually don't think that this full separation of art and science is quite as clear as it sometimes appears. The scientist is always based, to some extent, in proving its hypothesis. If we cannot prove it, we don't know if it's real. Whereas the artist dreams up an idea. If we cannot prove it, so what? The idea is there, who knows what might come from it. Because I've seen this very much in Maurizio's presentation as well, that there is this utopical idea that if we just take two organisms with two different capabilities, if we put them together, we make magic. They are beautiful ideas, and maybe in 10, 20 years, hopefully sooner, we will get something like that. Actually, at the moment, mixed cultivations like Maurizio showed here are actually having a lot of interest, because we're starting to realize that we might have to do this. We might have to have mixed cultivations to really achieve the purposes we want. But unfortunately, of course, it's not quite as simple as all that. We cannot just take organism A and organism B, throw them together and expect them to do what we want. Maurizio chose to work with fungi. He worked in the lab himself, which I think is quite a challenge for someone without the background. From what I understood, he actually did most of the experiments himself with just some sort of theoretical guidance, so that I think has been an even bigger challenge. But he also picked, let's say, somewhat unpopular group of organisms. In most cases we get a rather negative association with them. And I think this is, to me, one of the things where I think art can make a big difference. I think art can bridge, indeed, as has been discussed before, the barrier between the science and the value of science for society and the perception of the general public to, let's say, the ugly side of science.
Thank you very much for two very interesting talks. I think maybe I should ask the same of you that I asked of the other. Could you give a first response to what you just heard?
Well, I must say I generally have to agree on the fact and that for sure these kind of projects are quite ambitious, as I was already saying, yeah, it's sometimes a bit of a challenge to try and find a balance between the ambition of having a role in also this current scientific revolution matched with an artistic purpose, so also a communicative purpose and an aesthetic purpose, and actually the reality and how things really go in the end, which is something you could be slightly aware in the beginning, and you sort of become more and more aware while the process takes place.
How big was the difficulty for you to experience that it didn't work?
I don't consider it really a failure, if not that, yeah, more time is needed, and I'm strongly motivated to also keep on researching. My highest ambition in that direction, being aware of the fact that it would be a long-term research and a long-term program, would be the possibility of being matched maybe with a young PhD student, or which could take the research part and analyze it from a real scientific approach, and then collaborate on it. In the very beginning, when I initially made the proposal to really work and having some real novel organism, maybe not a complete organism, maybe an organism with some deficiency, but to have something alive and tangible in the end. I mostly worked myself in the lab, and I experimented directly with organisms without having this great experience behind me. If I have to look on a positive side, that's been the positive outcome, the fact of pushing myself to understand better yeah, the mechanisms that regulate the life of these organisms. As a designer, and the designers and the artists can play a role in acting also as translators and facilitators of a discussion, and just bringing out issue, not in a simplistic way, but in a more simple, accessible way.
People don't seem to want to know that the things they use every day are actually produced by fungi. And I've noticed this in many cases, so there's seriously a perception problem. For instance, I mean, the things like, pretty much nobody knows or wants to know that things like citric acid, which are in all our soft drinks, are actually produced by fungi. We have a problem there, because if on one hand people don't like anything to do with fungi, but at the same point, this is where we see our opportunities. We need to find a way to change the perception of the people, and I think this is one of the things where artists and artistic presentations can help to give a more, let's say, open, not first an open mind, and then hopefully afterwards a more positive mind of how people consider this. And well, we all know that negative perception can kill the most brilliant application. Yeah. So positive perception is very important, and as a rule probably scientists are not maybe always the best people in convincing the general public of the benefits.
And is it one of the things that you want to achieve?
Absolutely, and as a side effect it becomes, you could say, a sort of science communication. And I believe that all forms of life have a very high level of intelligence, and that we can learn a lot from all of them.
Of course, you see plastic going in and alcohol coming out, which also resonates, I think, for many people with the plastic soup issue, with a huge amount of plastic in the ocean, and the idea that we just have a lot of waste, and that actually you might, like some kind of alchemist, have a very complex installation to solve that issue, where actually the role of the fungi is downplayed somehow to a purely instrumental role, and you put plastic in, you get alcohol out.
Once again, my goal was to try and communicate about the possibility, and not to lie about the fact that, well, that's now possible, and the revolution starts with my installation, and now everybody's going to have in his house his bioreactor machine, and he's going to be able to put all his plastic waste in and have fuel for his car. Well, that would be wonderful, and it would be great to participate in this challenge, revolutionary challenge, but that's not exactly what I was trying to communicate. So yeah, a lot of people, though, inevitably confuse it a little bit. Yeah. Even if I would have achieved the missed result, still the touch, the artistic touch, particularly concerning aesthetic, would have been there. But I agree that maybe it's even better at this stage. And I'm totally sure that from the people that mainly sponsor this great opportunity, there is a great interest as stakeholders of having a piece of the cake back. Yeah. So, well, just to make it more brutal, you put money and you want a return on the investment, which maybe you hope to have it in sort of putting a nice spotlight, a positive light on the life sciences and on the work that all the Netherlands consortium are making. So, to be extremely honest, sometimes I've been noticing this during the process, and I was slightly bothered as well by this thing. Nevertheless, I was conducting my project in the way I like to do, without really trying to be influenced by this sort of, personally for me, unwanted publicity.
I do concede with your point. I'm sure, I mean, I've not been involved in the project from that side. I'm quite external. I've been watching it as it went along, and I'm sure there is indeed some motivation from NGI about, of course, preferably some positive outcome. I also agree with you there. Of course, we're all influenced all the time. But then the question is, should we then now be very critical of these artists which have become part, let's say, of the scientific art? Because on the other hand, you can also say, if the artists which are sitting here did not have some kind of positive affinity for research, would have ever applied, submitted the project. And in some cases, I actually wonder if the science hasn't been locked up a bit too much behind the doors of the lab. And it's about time that we do this a little bit more to actually give a counterweight to all the negative which is out there.
I think this is yet another example of how art and science are really close to each other, and maybe could also learn from each other, not only because they want to know something about the world, they have some kind of deep engagement with things, but also because it's something political playing itself out in society. So, well, I myself learned a lot this afternoon. I hope the same is true for you. I would like to thank all speakers very much. And a very nice, playful afternoon also. And